Chapter 1. The First Generation. Ivan Gromov, 1876-1910. Documentary introduction. Voice of the narrator. What you're about to read comes from fragmented records discovered in the Kamensk Regional Archive in 2019, buried in a leather-bound ledger marked only with a rust-colored handprint. The entries were written by Father Grigory Volkov, parish priest of the Church of the Transfiguration, between 1876 and 1911. Some pages are water-damaged, others are torn, as if someone tried to destroy them but stopped halfway. The handwriting changes throughout, steady at first, then increasingly erratic, as if the writer's hand was shaking. Alongside the priest's testimony, we found 12 letters written by Maria Gromova, née Sokolova, to her sister in Moscow. She never sent them. Each envelope was sealed but never posted. It's unclear whether she was afraid to send them or whether something prevented her. This is the story those documents tell. Part 1. November 1876. The Collapse. From Father Grigory's Ledger, November 14, 1876. Today, I performed the burial rites for 19 souls taken by the mine collapse 2 days past. Among the dead, Elena Gromova, wife of the blacksmith Ivan, and their 3 sons, Alexei, age 9, Dmitri, age 7, and Pavel, age 4. Ivan did not attend the service. The villagers say he has not left his cabin since it happened. I went to him this evening. He would not open the door. Through the window, I saw him sitting at his table, still as stone, staring at nothing. I spoke prayers through the door. I do not think he heard me. Ivan Gromov was 42 years old the day the mountain took his family. He'd been working at his forge, tempering axe heads for the logging crews, when the ground shook. Not a violent tremor, just a subtle rolling motion, like the earth taking a deep breath and holding it. Then came the sound, a low, grinding roar from inside the mountain, followed by silence so absolute it seemed the world had stopped. He dropped his hammer and ran. By the time he reached the mine entrance, half the village was already there, women screaming, men shouting orders, and at the mouth of the shaft, nothing but a wall of collapsed rock and timber, still settling, dust pouring out like smoke from a chimney. Ivan tore at the rubble with his bare hands. The stones cut his palms, split his fingernails, ground the skin from his knuckles. He didn't feel it. Men tried to pull him back. He threw them off and kept digging, kept calling their names, Elena, Alexei, Dmitri, Pavel, until his voice cracked and went silent. They found no bodies. The collapse was too deep, the shaft too unstable. On November 13th, Father Grigory held a mass burial for empty coffins. Ivan did not attend. Part 2, the 3 days from Father Grigory's Ledger, November 17, 1876. Ivan Gromov has not emerged from his cabin in 5 days. Neighbors bring bread and leave it at his door. It remains untouched. I hear no sounds from within, no movement, no weeping. Yegor Petrov, the village elder, fears Ivan may have taken his own life. I told him I would go tomorrow morning. God grant me the words. Inside the cabin, Ivan sat at the rough-hewn table where Elena used to knead bread. Her apron still hung on the iron hook by the stove, rough linen stained with flour and beetroot juice. Pavel's wooden horse sat on the shelf Ivan had built last spring. Alexei's primer, half finished, lay open near the lamp. For 3 days, Ivan did not move, did not eat, did not sleep. He sat and stared at the objects that remained, trying to understand how they could still exist when the people who used them did not. The apron should have dissolved. The toy should have crumbled. The book should have burned. But they remained, indifferent, ordinary, as if nothing had changed. On the 3rd night, Ivan stood. He pulled on his sheepskin coat, the heavy one Elena had sewn for him 2 winters ago, insulated with lamb's wool, stitched with gut thread she'd waxed herself. He took a candle and a tinderbox. and he walked north, toward the old mine. Part 3, Zheleznaya Utoba. The abandoned shaft on the north face of Mount Kamen had been sealed for 50 years. The old-timers called it Zheleznaya Utoba, the Iron Womb. They said it was the first mine dug in the Urals, back when the Stroganov family ruled the territory, before the Empress nationalized the ore rights. They also said other things, that miners who worked too deep heard voices, that tools went missing and reappeared covered in rust, that the iron ore bled if you cut it wrong. Superstitious nonsense, the mine owner said, but they never reopened the shaft. Ivan pulled away the rotted boards covering the entrance. The timber was soft with decay, crumbling in his hands. Beyond the opening, darkness that seemed to swallow his candlelight, making the flame gutter and shrink. He descended. The passage sloped steeply downward. The walls glistened with moisture, not water, but something thicker, darkly iridescent in the candlelight. The air smelled of rust and something older, something organic and mineral at once, like blood mixed with stone dust. At the bottom of the shaft, perhaps 200 feet down, though Ivan had lost all sense of distance, the tunnel opened into a chamber, and there, carved into the living rock, Ivan found the shrine. 12 pillars arranged in a circle, each pillar carved with symbols, not letters, not pictures, but shapes that hurt to look at directly, that seemed to shift when seen from the corner of the eye. In the center, an altar, black basalt or something darker, its surface covered with stains that could have been soot or rust or old blood. Ivan set down his candle. The flame did not flicker. The air here was perfectly still, perfectly silent, as if the mountain was holding its breath. He stood before the altar for a long time. Minutes. Hours. Time felt strange here, elastic, unreliable, and as he stood, something changed in the silence, not a sound, but the quality of silence, the way it pressed against his ears, against his chest, against the inside of his skull. Something was paying attention. Ivan's voice, when he finally spoke, was hoarse, broken from 3 days of silent grief. "I've lost everything." The silence deepened. "I should have been there. I should have died with them. But I wasn't. And I didn't. And now they're gone, and I'm still here, and I don't know why. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the altar to steady them. The stone was cold, colder than it should be this deep underground, cold enough that it burned. "If something's down here, if there's anything listening, I'll give you whatever you want. My life, my soul, whatever I have left. Just give me a reason, give me purpose, give me the strength to make sure this never happens again, to anyone." The air shifted, not wind, something subtler, a change in pressure or temperature or the fundamental nature of the space around him. Ivan's breath misted, though a moment ago it hadn't. And then without sound, without words, there was an answer, not heard, not seen, felt the way you feel thunder in your chest before your ears register the sound. A presence vast and patient, ancient beyond reckoning, stirring from something deeper than sleep. Images flooded Ivan's mind, not his own thoughts, but something shown to him. His hand, cutting rock like butter, his arm lifting a beam that should crush him. His children he didn't have yet, born with something different in their blood, and their children and their children's children, changing, hardening, becoming something that couldn't be killed by falling stone or crushing weight or any earthly force. Protection, power, permanence, but also pain, transformation, the slow surrender of flesh to something other than flesh, a bargain offered not in words but in pure meaning. Give your blood to the iron, and the iron will give your line strength forever. Ivan understood dimly that he was being offered something enormous and terrible, that whatever he chose here would echo through generations, that his children's children's children would pay for this decision. But in that moment, standing in the dark with the weight of his grief crushing him more surely than any cave-in, Ivan couldn't see that far ahead. He could only see Elena's face, Alexei's laugh, Dmitri's careful hands, Pavel's trust, all gone, all ash and stone and empty space where warmth used to be. On the altar, barely visible in the candlelight, lay a blade, ancient, pitted with rust but somehow still sharp, its edge irregular and cruel. Ivan picked it up. The metal was so cold it stuck to his palm. He drew the blade across his left hand, not hesitating, not thinking, just acting, letting pain and desperation guide him, and watched the blood well up, black in the dim light. He pressed his bleeding palm to the altar. The stone drank the blood, not absorbed it, drank it, pulling it from his hand with terrible eagerness, and where the blood touched, the stains on the altar glowed faintly, ember red, like iron in a forge. Ivan felt something rush up his arm, not through his veins, but through his bones, through the marrow, through spaces in his body he hadn't known existed. It was molten and solid at once, burning and freezing, excruciating and somehow right, like a limb that had been asleep for years suddenly waking. He tried to pull his hand back. It wouldn't move. He was stuck, palm flat to the stone, blood flowing not out but in, backward, carrying something else with it, something that filled him cell by cell. Ivan opened his mouth to scream. No sound came. His vision grayed, then darkened, and the last thing he saw before consciousness left him was his own hand on the altar, and the veins beneath his skin had gone gray like iron wire beneath paper. Part 4. The Morning After, from Father Grigory's Ledger, November 18, 1876. Ivan Gromov appeared at his forge this morning. I saw him from the church steps. He looked unwell, pale. His left arm hung strangely at his side, as if injured. When I called to him, he did not respond. He lit his forge and began to work. I went to him. Asked if he needed the doctor. He said no. Asked if he would speak with me. He said no. His eyes were distant, as if he were looking at something far away or something long ago. Ivan woke at dawn, lying on the floor of the shrine chamber. His candle had burned down to nothing. He was shivering not from cold, but from shock, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. His left hand throbbed. When he looked at it, the cut across his palm had sealed, not with a scab, but with smooth, slightly shiny tissue, pale gray like tarnished silver. He flexed his fingers. They moved, but stiffly, as if the joints needed oil. He climbed out of the shaft into morning light that hurt his eyes, walked back to the village through snow that had fallen during the night, his boots leaving uneven tracks, the left foot dragging slightly, as if his leg wasn't quite obeying properly. At the forge, he started a fire, fed it charcoal, pumped the bellows until the coals glowed white-hot. He didn't know why he was doing this. He had no orders to fill, no reason to work, but his hands knew what to do. The forge was familiar, routine, something to hold on to while the world shifted around him. He picked up his hammer. The handle felt strange in his left hand, thinner than usual, or his grip was stronger. He brought the hammer down on a piece of scrap iron, and the impact jarred his arm all the way to his shoulder, but the metal bent under the blow like clay. Ivan stared at the iron, at his hammer, at his hand, and slowly, carefully, he began to test what he had become. Part 5. The first year from Maria Sokolova's unsent letter to her sister, dated August 14, 1878. Katya, I know I should have written sooner. I know you must wonder why I agreed to marry a man I barely knew, a widower with such a tragic history. The truth is, I don't entirely understand it myself. When Father Grigory suggested the match, something in me said yes before my mind could catch up. Perhaps it was loneliness, perhaps it was pity, or perhaps it was the way Ivan looks at me. Not with love, not yet, but with such desperate need for something living in his house, something warm and real to remind him that the world is not only death and stone. He is kind to me in his way, quiet, careful. He works from dawn until long after dark, and when he comes to bed, his hands are always cold. Even in summer, I have never seen him remove his left glove in my presence. When I ask about it, he says it was injured in the mine collapse. I do not press. We all have scars we prefer to keep covered. Between 1876 and 1880, Father Grigory's ledger entries about Ivan Gromov grow increasingly uneasy. March 1877. Ivan Gromov has become the strongest smith in Kamensk. He shapes iron with a facility I have never witnessed. The other smiths speak of him with a mixture of admiration and unease. December 1877. I happened to see Ivan working without his glove today. His left hand appears unusual. The skin has a grayish cast, and when he gripped a red-hot horseshoe, he did not flinch. I asked if he was injured. He covered his hand and would not answer. June 1878. Ivan and Maria were married today. She is a good woman, practical, pious, resilient. I pray she brings him peace, but I notice he wears the glove even during the ceremony, and when I blessed his hands, the left one felt wrong, too hard beneath the leather, too cold. February 1879. I visited the Gromovs. Maria is with child. She seems happy, though tired. Ivan sits by the fire in the evenings and stares at his hands. Always his hands. I asked what troubles him. He said, "I feel it growing, Father, every day a little more." I asked what he meant. He would not say. October 1882. Maria gave birth to a healthy son yesterday. They named him Pyotr. When I baptized the child, I noticed marks, gray lines beneath the skin of his shoulders and arms like threads of metal running through his flesh. I said nothing. Perhaps it is only my imagination. Perhaps I see shadows where none exist. But when I looked at Ivan's face, I saw he had noticed them too. And I saw fear there, the first real emotion I've seen from him since his family died. Part 6, 1890, 14 years later. By 1890, Ivan's left arm from wrist to shoulder had changed completely. The skin was intact but thin as parchment, stretched over something that was no longer bone and muscle. When he moved it, there was a faint grinding sound, like stone on stone or metal on metal. He could no longer bend his elbow more than a few degrees. His wrist was stiff, the fingers locked in a permanent partial curl, but with that hand, he could grip a red-hot iron bar without burning, could bend steel as thick as his thumb, could hammer for hours without tiring. The doctors who examined him, Dr. Kerensky from Yekaterinburg, who came at Father Grigory's request, had no explanation. Kerensky wrote in his report, "The patient presents with progressive calcification of the left upper limb, origin unknown. The affected tissue is significantly harder than normal bone, yet retains some flexibility and sensation. X-ray equipment being unavailable in this region, I cannot determine the internal structure. Recommend amputation before the condition spreads further. Patient refuses all treatment." Ivan refused because he knew amputation wouldn't help. This wasn't disease. This was transformation, payment for the bargain he'd made, and it was only just beginning. His son Pyotr was 8 years old now, a strong boy, quick and clever, with Maria's dark eyes and Ivan's broad shoulders. But those gray lines under his skin had grown. They branched like rivers on a map, running down his arms, across his chest, over his ribs. And Pyotr could do things no 8-year-old should be able to do. Lift stones too heavy for a grown man. Hear conversations from rooms away. Taste the iron content in well water. Feel magnetic north like a needle in his brain. Maria watched her son and husband with growing fear that she couldn't name, couldn't speak, could barely admit to herself. On cold nights when Ivan's metal hand clicked and ground in his sleep, she lay awake and prayed, not for salvation, not for understanding, but simply for the strength to endure whatever was coming. Because something was coming. She could feel it the way animals feel earthquakes before they strike, the way birds flee before storms arrive, a change moving through her family like slow thunder, generation by generation, inevitable as rust. Part 7, 1905. The prophecy unfolds. From Father Grigory's final entry, dated March 3, 1905. I am old now. My hands shake so badly I can barely hold the pen, but I must record this before I die, so that someone someday might understand what began here in Kamensk. Ivan Gromov came to me today. He can barely walk. His entire left side is transformed now. Arm, ribs, hip, leg, all of it harder than any earthly material, cold as deep stone. He asked me to hear his confession. I agreed. He told me everything, the shrine, the bargain, the price. And he told me what he knows now, what the transformation means, that his line will continue changing generation by generation, that his grandson's children will be born more metal than flesh, that eventually, 7 generations from now, he said, they will no longer be human at all. I asked if he regretted it. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, I made the choice in grief and desperation, and I would give anything to unmake it. But Father, listen. My boy Pyotr is strong. He saved 3 men from a mine collapse last year, held up a support beam while they escaped. It should have crushed him. It didn't even bruise him. So I wonder, is this curse, or is it the answer to my prayer? Is it damnation, or is it exactly what I asked for, the power to protect forever? I had no answer for him. I still don't. May God forgive us both. Ivan Gromov died in 1910 at 66 years old. His body was too heavy to carry. The metallic transformation had made him dense as iron. They buried him where they'd buried all the Gromovs for 3 generations, in a plot behind the Church of the Transfiguration, marked with a simple stone cross. But 3 weeks after the burial, grave robbers opened the coffin, thinking a wealthy man had been interred with valuables. What they found sent them running to Father Grigory, wild-eyed and babbling. Ivan's body had not decayed. The flesh had hardened further, his entire left side now solid metal gleaming dully in the lantern light, and the transformation was still spreading. His right arm showed gray discoloration creeping up from the wrist. His chest was hard as armor plate. His eyes, open, though he'd been buried with them closed, were filmed with something like iron oxide, rust red and reflective. Father Grigory ordered the coffin resealed and moved, secretly, at night, to the old mine shaft where it had all begun. They lowered it deep into Железная Utoba and collapsed the entrance with explosives. No marker, no record, just stone and darkness and silence. And somewhere far above, in the village of Kamensk, Ivan's grandchildren were being born. 3 babies in 1910, 2 in 1911, 5 in 1912, each one marked with gray beneath their skin, each one carrying the iron deeper into their cells, generation by generation, year by year, until the transformation was complete. The debt was being paid, the iron was spreading, and nothing, no prayer, no medicine, no human will, could stop it now. Chapter 2. The Second Generation. Pyotr Gromov, 1882-1945. Documentary Introduction. Pyotr Gromov was born on October 18, 1882, 6 years after his father made the bargain in the iron womb. Unlike Ivan, Pyotr's transformation was not sudden or catastrophic. It was patient, methodical, a slow corruption that began in the womb and continued throughout his life, as if the iron itself was learning how to remake human flesh more efficiently with each generation. By the time Pyotr reached manhood, he would possess abilities that terrified those around him. He could hear conversations through solid walls. He could sense the presence of metal as clearly as you sense the sun on your skin. And beneath his skin, the gray lines that marked his birth had become highways of silver, pathways through which something old and mechanical was flowing. What follows is reconstructed from official military records, family correspondence, asylum records, and the confessions of a man who claimed to have worked alongside Pyotr Gromov for 30 years. Part 1. The Gifted Child, 1895. From the Journal of Yuri Kerensky, Village Schoolmaster, dated December 1890. Today I attempted to teach mathematics to the Gromov boy. Addition, subtraction, concepts that Katya Volkova mastered at age 7, the boy seemed to understand instantly. But when I asked him to solve a problem aloud, he sat perfectly still for nearly 2 minutes without speaking. Then, without writing anything, he simply recited the answer, 247. I asked him how he knew. He said, "I heard it." I don't understand what he meant. When I questioned his mother, she became very still. She said, "Some children are sensitive to things. Let him be different." I pressed no further. There was something in her eyes that discouraged curiosity. By age 8, Pyotr Gromov exhibited what the superstitious villagers called talent, and what modern medicine might classify as sensory processing abnormality or early onset synesthesia. He could identify the type and purity of ore by smell. He could hear sounds too faint for normal human ears, the scraping of a rat in the walls, the whisper of wind through a crack in mortar, the distinct frequency of different metals vibrating. The other children feared him, not because he was cruel. Pyotr was quiet, almost gentle in his way, but because he was strange. He would sit in the village square and stare at nothing, perfectly motionless for hours. He would refuse certain foods with a shudder, claiming they tasted like poison and stone. He moved with an odd stiffness, as if his joints weren't quite cooperating, as if he had to consciously instruct his limbs to bend. And there were the marks on his skin. By age 10, the gray lines that had been barely visible at birth had darkened to silver, spreading like a disease across his shoulders, down his arms, across his ribs. Other children would sometimes see him bathing at the river, the shirt off, revealing the branching metallic pathways beneath the surface, and they would scream. Pyotr never seemed to notice their reactions, or perhaps he simply didn't care. His father watched him with an expression that mixed pride, horror, and desperate resignation. Ivan had tried to protect his son from the worst of it, keeping him indoors when possible, discouraging friendships, removing him from school after age 12. But you cannot hide what is written into the blood. By Pyotr's 16th year, every person in Kamensk knew that the blacksmith's boy was not quite human. Part 2, The Awakening, 1898 and 1901. Between 1898 and 1901, something shifted in Pyotr Gromov's body. The transformation that had been slow and subtle began to accelerate. His forearms hardened noticeably, the skin taking on a dull, leaden quality, becoming stiff and difficult to bend. By 1899, he could no longer flex his wrists properly. By 1900, his hands had taken on a strange appearance, the fingers too rigid, the nails becoming translucent and faintly metallic, like poorly maintained silver. But with this transformation came a peculiar gift. In the summer of 1899, a minor cave-in occurred in the western shaft of Kamen Mine, not the abandoned one where Ivan had made his bargain, but an active working mine that employed 40 men. 2 men were trapped beneath a collapsed support beam, the timber too massive for normal leverage to remove. They would have died, the shift would have ended, the mine would have been sealed off while rescue attempts were made, and the men would have suffocated in the darkness beneath tons of rock. Pyotr was working at his father's forge that day. A messenger came running, breathless, shouting about the collapse. Ivan was too old now, his left side too rigid to be useful. But Pyotr stood up. Without a word, he walked to the mine. What happened next entered village legend, though not for the reasons people imagined. When Pyotr descended into the collapsed section, he moved carefully, deliberately, his metallic fingers finding purchase on stone and timber with uncanny precision. He examined the beam for a long moment, not frantically, but with the focus of someone solving a problem, someone listening to something in the rock itself. Then he positioned himself beneath it, gripped it with both hands, and lifted. According to the miners who witnessed it, and several of them swore testimonies to Father Grigory that were later sealed in the church records, what they saw was not a man lifting a beam. What they saw was something far stranger. The beam rose, yes, but it did so smoothly, as if its weight was being distributed through some invisible network, as if gravity itself was being negotiated with rather than overcome. And Pyotr's face, one miner, Dmitry Sokolov, described it as blank, like he wasn't really there, like something else was using his body, showed no strain at all. From the testimony of Dmitry Sokolov, recorded by Father Grigory on November 12, 1899, his hands were glowing, not bright, not like fire, but like you could see light coming from under the skin. The marks on his arms, the silver ones, they were shining, and there was this sound. Not loud, but you could feel it in your bones. Like metal singing, maybe. Like a tuning fork, but deep. And when he lifted that beam, it was the strangest thing. It didn't feel like he was using strength. It felt like he was communicating with it. Like the beam was choosing to be lighter. When we pulled our friends out, he just let it drop. It crashed down and split right down the middle. And then he walked away, and his hands stopped glowing, and he looked like a normal boy again, except for the way he was shaking. After he left, I checked his palms. There were no calluses, no marks where the beam had pressed, nothing. It was like he'd lifted it through something other than his hands. The incident transformed Pyotr's status in the village. He went from being the strange, unsettling blacksmith's boy to being the strong one, the protector, the man you wanted nearby when danger struck. But Ivan understood what had really happened. He'd seen the exhaustion afterward, the way Pyotr's left arm had to be supported for 2 days, as if it had genuinely been damaged though no wound showed. He saw his son grip his own hands the following morning and stare at them with an expression Ivan recognized. The horrified fascination of watching yourself transform into something other. The iron was consuming him, faster now, and there were still 5 generations to go. Part 3. The Wife, 1902-1914. In 1902, at age 20, Pyotr Gromov married Svetlana Ivanovna, the schoolmaster's quiet daughter. She was 22, intelligent, and had the kind of calm acceptance that comes from a childhood spent around disorder. Her mother had been mentally ill, prone to episodes, and Svetlana had learned early how to move around chaos without becoming part of it. She noticed everything about Pyotr immediately, from Svetlana's private letters discovered in 1998 among archived family documents. "Dearest Katya, you asked me in your last letter if I am happy. Happiness seems like the wrong word. It's like asking if the moon is happy to orbit the earth. The question assumes a kind of choice that doesn't exist. I am married to a man who is very slowly becoming something else. I knew this before we married." Father Grigory warned me, though delicately. He spoke of inherited conditions and family peculiarities. But when I met Pyotr, I understood what he meant. I could see it in the way Pyotr moved, in the silver beneath his skin that catches the light, in the way he sometimes looks at his own hands as if they are puppets he's learned to operate but doesn't fully trust. Yet he is kind to me. More than kind. He is carefully, intentionally kind, the way you might handle something precious and fragile. He does not touch me with his right hand when his left is available, because he fears the left one. I can see it in his eyes. He is afraid it will hurt me. We have consummated the marriage, though he insisted on darkness. I don't think he wanted me to see his body, but I did. His chest is already marked, the gray lines visible in the faint light from the window, and his left arm, Katya, his left arm is becoming solid. The transformation is accelerating. Our doctor came yesterday at my insistence. He examined Pyotr and said nothing that made sense. He spoke of mineral deposits and hereditary calcification and recommended massage and exercise. Pyotr smiled and thanked him and paid him well, and the doctor left, looking disturbed. I am pregnant. Pyotr doesn't know yet. I only confirmed it this morning. I am terrified. What will this child inherit? What is growing inside me, a son or a daughter or something else entirely? And yet, I am not sorry I married him. Is that madness? Their first child, Alexei, was born in 1903. Their second, Nikolai, in 1905. Both boys showed the marks immediately, the gray lines visible on their skin within the first hours of life. Both exhibited the sensory abilities their father possessed, hearing sounds beyond normal human range, moving with an uncanny awareness of space, responding to things no one else could perceive. Between 1903 and 1914, as Svetlana raised her two boys and watched her husband transform, she developed what she called her theory of payment. She wrote about it in letters she never sent, diary entries locked in a wooden box beneath the floorboards. From Svetlana's private journal, 1910. I have come to believe that this transformation is not random or degenerative. It is payment. Ivan made a bargain, and the price is being extracted from his bloodline, generation by generation. First generation, Ivan gave his hand. One arm transformed over 30 years. Second generation, Pyotr is giving more. Both forearms already hardened, his chest beginning to stiffen. How much longer will he have? How much of him will turn to metal before he dies? And the children, what will they pay? What parts of them will become iron? It is as if there is a debt that must be paid, not in money, not in years, but in flesh itself. Each generation must surrender more than the last, and the only question is, how many generations can survive this? At what point does a person become so transformed that what remains is no longer human at all? Part 4. The War Years, 1914-1917. When World War I came to Russia, Pyotr Gromov was 32 years old. Alexei was 11. Nikolai was 9. Both boys were showing signs of physical development far beyond their years. They were already taller than many men, already displaying strength that alarmed their mother. Pyotr was conscripted in early 1914, sent to the Eastern Front with the 43rd Infantry Division. Svetlana watched him leave from the doorway, his uniform hanging oddly on his increasingly rigid frame, and made a prayer to a god she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. What followed was a nightmare that would haunt military records for decades, though most accounts were later classified or destroyed. From the diary of Colonel Ivan Malkovich, 43rd Infantry Division, dated March 15, 1916. Private Gromov exhibits extraordinary abilities. In the assault on Hill 403, he carried a machine gun position single-handedly, literally. When the gun jammed, he tore the entire apparatus free from its mounting and carried it forward while maintaining suppressive fire. The enemy was so shocked that their front collapsed. General Yudenich recommended him for commendation. However, I have concerns. Gromov's hands are wrong. The regimental surgeon examined him at my request. He said the bone density is abnormally high. The muscle tissue shows unusual striations. and there is something beneath the skin that he describes as metallic pathways. I ordered him not to examine Gromov again. Some things are better left unobserved. By 1917, Pyotr had been involved in 17 major engagements and hadn't sustained a single serious wound. Shrapnel that would have torn open another man's flesh seemed to bounce off him. A sniper's bullet caught him in the shoulder and did no damage. Witnesses said they heard a sound like a bullet striking a steel plate. Other soldiers began to fear him, to whisper about him. Some claimed he was a spirit, a revenant sent by the Tsar to fight the Bolsheviks. Others said he was something demonic, a curse made flesh and sent to wage war. Religious soldiers refused to stand near him. Superstitious ones made signs against evil when he passed. Then came October 1917, and the incident that would change everything. Part 5, The Bullet, October 17, 1917, exact time 3:47 p.m. From the account of Private Mikhail Kushner, survivor of the battalion of Hill Bolshaya Neva, recorded in 1952. We were under heavy fire from the ridge. The commander was dead. Everyone was frozen, just waiting to die. Then Gromov stood up and walked forward, just walked, not ran, not crouching, just walked like he was going for a morning stroll. Bullets were hitting the ground around him, but he didn't even flinch. At the top of the ridge, maybe 30 meters away, there was a sniper. Russian boy couldn't have been more than 17. When Gromov was about 50 meters away, the sniper took a shot. I saw the muzzle flash, saw the smoke, and I knew it would hit. The bullet caught Gromov square in the chest, dead center, the kind of shot that ends a man. But it didn't. The bullet bounced. Not deflected, bounced, like it had hit steel plating. The projectile came back toward us. I ducked. The bullet hit the ground 10 meters behind Gromov and skidded to a stop in the mud. For a moment, everything was silent. We could see the sniper from where we were. He had lowered his rifle. He was just staring. Gromov kept walking. When he reached the ridge, he climbed up to where the sniper was. We couldn't see what happened next. Just saw Gromov's shadow against the sky, and then the sniper flew backward, actually flew like something had thrown him. He landed and didn't move again. Gromov stood there for a long time, looking down at his own chest. Then he tore his uniform open. We could see from where we were that there was blood. But that's not what made us all cross ourselves. It was the metal underneath. Gromov's entire chest was silver, not covered with metal, but made of it. The skin had torn away from the bullet impact, and underneath was nothing but gleaming metal, shaped like ribs, and it was glowing faintly with heat. As we watched, the metal began to cool. The glow faded, and the skin, I swear to God this is true, the skin began to grow back. Not like a wound healing, like the skin was choosing to regrow, like it was repairing itself deliberately. Gromov pulled his uniform back together and walked back to us. He didn't say a word. When he passed our position, we could see his chest rising and falling, and with each breath you could hear metal grinding against metal beneath the skin, like pistons in an engine. That night, Pyotr Gromov walked away from his unit. He didn't run, didn't slip away secretly, simply stood up during a transport march and began walking northeast, away from the front lines toward home. The officers didn't try to stop him. They had all seen what he was. They had all understood wordlessly that Pyotr Gromov was no longer a soldier they could command. He walked for 6 weeks, moving through a collapsing empire, through the chaos of a nation eating itself. He walked through Ukraine, across the steppes, through forests becoming winter, and he walked without stopping, without resting more than an hour at a time, driven by something in the silver pathways of his blood, a pull toward home, toward his wife, toward the life he had left behind. Part 6, The Homecoming, November 1917. Svetlana heard the knock on the door at dawn. She was already awake. She barely slept anymore, listening always for her boys. listening to the sounds of revolution echoing across the landscape, listening to the radio reports of the Tsar's abdication, listening to the world ending, and when she opened the door, she didn't recognize the man standing there. He was thin, gaunt. His uniform hung off him like it was made for a larger man. His eyes were the color of iron, a color she'd never seen on a human face before, a color that wasn't quite natural. "Pyotr," she whispered. He nodded. His voice, when he spoke, sounded strange, like metal being struck, like glass breaking, like something that had learned human speech but retained its essential otherness. "I came home." She wanted to embrace him, but something in his posture, in the way his metallic hands hung at his sides, prevented her. Instead, she stepped aside and let him enter. The boys saw him and did not react with the joy children normally show for a father returning from war. Instead, they both went very still. Alexei, now 14, began breathing heavily. Nikolai, 12, closed his eyes. And then, simultaneously, both boys rose from their chairs and stood at attention, as if responding to an order only they could hear. Pyotr looked at his sons for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "You're beginning to synchronize." It wasn't a question. Part 7. The Synchronized Bond, 1918-1925. What happened between 1918 and 1925 was subtle at first, then unmistakable. The two boys began to merge, not physically, but psychologically, neurologically. They began to think as one entity inhabiting two bodies. It started with finishing each other's sentences, then with simultaneous movements. They would stand at exactly the same moment, move to the door at the same time, extend their hands in identical gestures. Then came the stranger part. They began to feel each other's pain. From the testimony of Dr. Helena Volkova, village physician, recorded in 1952. In early 1921, I was called to the Gromov house because the younger boy, Nikolai, had fallen from the roof and broken his arm. When I arrived, I found something remarkable. The older boy, Alexei, who was supposedly inside the house, had simultaneously fallen and sustained an identical break in his arm. Left radius, clean fracture, same location. I examined both boys. Their wounds were perfectly mirrored. When I set Nikolai's bone, I could see Alexei flinch with pain, though I was not touching him. When I gave Nikolai laudanum for the pain, Alexei's eyes became glassy at exactly the same moment. But what frightened me most was what I observed in their consciousness. They seemed to exist in a state of continuous negotiation. Nikolai would think something. I could see his eyes move in that specific way that indicates thought, and then Alexei would nod, as if confirming. Then they would act on that shared decision simultaneously. I mentioned this to their father. He was sitting by the fire, and when I described what I'd seen, he put his face in his metallic hands, and yes, by that time, both his hands were transformed, and he wept. Not with sound, just tears running down his face while his body remained perfectly still, like the iron inside him was too rigid for his emotions to move it. After a long silence, he said, "They are becoming one mind. It will happen faster with each generation. Eventually there won't be two minds. There will be one mind distributed across multiple bodies. I don't know if that is evolution or extinction." By 1925, when Alexei was 22 and Nikolai was 20, the synchronization was nearly complete. They could communicate without words. They could sense each other's emotions as clearly as they felt their own. And they were beginning to exhibit abilities that neither boy possessed individually. Objects would move when both twins concentrated on them. Electrical lights would brighten in their presence. Animals would become agitated, as if responding to electromagnetic fields that the twins were generating. When they stood together, people nearby reported feeling a strange vibration in the air, a sensation that was neither sound nor touch, but something in between. Pyotr watched his sons and felt a mixture of wonder and dread. This was what the bargain was building toward. This was the next step in whatever transformation the iron had set in motion. A collective consciousness, distributed consciousness, a form of intelligence that transcended the boundaries of individual flesh. Part 8. The Death of Pyotr, 1940-1945. Throughout the 1930s and early 1940s, Pyotr Gromov slowly became less animate. The transformation that had been creeping through his body for decades finally reached a critical point. By 1940, at 58 years old, his entire body was undergoing the final stages of metamorphosis. His right arm had begun to transform, not suddenly, but in the same slow, inevitable way his left arm had decades before. The metallic corrosion spread across his ribs, visible now as defined plating beneath paper-thin skin. He could no longer work at the forge, could barely walk. His voice had changed. It had taken on that metallic quality permanently now, a sound that seemed to come from somewhere inside the metal rather than from vocal cords. In his final year, 1945, Pyotr spent most of his time in bed, staring at the ceiling, his body almost completely transformed, his mind apparently still intact, though increasingly distant. His last coherent communication came on January 2nd, 1945. Svetlana sat by his bedside, holding his rigid metal hand, and Pyotr turned his iron-colored eyes toward her and spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through a tunnel, like metal singing. "The payment," he said, "is almost finished. I gave my arms. My sons are giving their minds. The third generation will give more, everything. They will not be human. They will be what the iron wants them to be." "Is that a curse?" Svetlana asked, her voice breaking. Pyotr was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Your father prayed when I was born. Did you know that? He prayed that I would be strong, strong enough to survive, strong enough to protect what I loved. And I did. I survived. I protected." He paused. "But maybe that's what a curse is, getting exactly what you prayed for." He died the next morning, January 3rd, 1945. His body was so dense, so heavy with transformation, that they had to use iron pulleys to move him. They buried him in the village cemetery, in the same plot where his father Ivan had been secretly buried 35 years earlier, though Svetlana didn't know that there was a sealed chamber beneath the earth, holding the petrified remains of a man who had made a bargain in the dark. The gravediggers worked quickly and spoke in whispers. One of them, old Grigory Petrov, claimed that as they lowered Pyotr's coffin, he heard a sound from deep below, a faint grinding, a distant vibration, as if something far beneath the earth had felt the arrival of another transformed Gromov and was acknowledging it. Part 9. The Twins Alone, 1945-1950. After Pyotr's death, something changed in Alexei and Nikolai Gromov. The separation that had always existed between them, the sense of being two individuals sharing a connection, finally dissolved. They became, for all practical purposes, a single consciousness distributed across two bodies. They would finish sentences not just in agreement, but in the exact same words, spoken simultaneously. They moved with perfect synchronization, their gaits identical, their breathing synchronized. Villagers began to treat them as a unit, not as two men, but as two expressions of a single entity. The Gromov twins, they called them, though Alexei was technically 3 years older, the Iron Brothers. From the private journal of Dr. Helena Volkova, 1948. "I encountered the twins today at the market. What disturbed me was not their appearance, though they are disturbing enough, their bodies so obviously transformed, the metallic plating visible through their shirts, but their consciousness. They spoke to me, but not as two people. They spoke as one entity, their voices overlapping, their thoughts appearing to complete each other mid-sentence. When I asked how they were feeling, Alexei began to answer, but Nikolai finished the sentence. Not to add his own perspective, but to say exactly what Alexei would have said. It was like watching a person speak using two mouths. I asked them if they ever felt individual, if they ever had thoughts that were just theirs, alone. They looked at each other, and I swear they did this simultaneously, their heads turning at the exact same angle. And then Nikolai spoke. We did. Once. It's hard to remember what that felt like trying to remember dreaming after you wake up. You know you had separate dreams, but you can't quite recall what they were about. By 1950, when they were both in their early 30s, the twins had become something unprecedented. They exhibited abilities that seemed to defy explanation. Telekinesis. Objects would move when they concentrated on them, and the movement was never chaotic, always precise, always controlled. Electromagnetic manipulation. Electrical devices would malfunction in their presence, or conversely, become enhanced, operating at peak efficiency. Apparent telepathy, not just with each other, but with other family members. They claimed to be able to sense the emotional states of their relatives from distances of kilometers away. And most disturbing, they seemed to be able to perceive the iron network. When asked what they were looking at, staring into the middle distance, they would describe threads of light beneath the skin, highways of connection, the pathways the iron travels through the family blood. In the summer of 1950, the Soviet government discovered them. Part X, The Vanishing 1950, from Declassified FSB records, released in 2001. Subject, Gromov Group, Alexei and Nikolai Gromov. In July 1950, the brothers were identified by local informants as potential subjects for the Biological Weapons Enhancement Program. Preliminary physical examination showed anomalous tissue structure, increased muscle density, unusual metallic discoloration of the skin, apparently accelerated healing capabilities. The brothers were brought into custody for further examination. Both entered the facility without resistance. Initial testing showed bone density approximately 300% higher than normal human, unusual mineral composition in blood. Iron content 15-20 times higher than baseline. Apparent telepathic synchronization between the two subjects. Resistance to pain stimuli approaching total anesthesia. Further testing was deemed necessary. Security was increased. Both subjects were placed in adjacent cells so that their synchronization could be monitored for potential weaponization. The cells were separated by reinforced glass, 15mm tempered glass that was theoretically unbreakable, installed specifically to allow observation while maintaining security. For 3 days, the twins did nothing. They simply sat, facing their glass walls, and stared into the space beyond. Scientists observed them, took notes, recorded their biometrics. Both men's heart rates were identical, their breathing synchronized. It was as if they were not two separate organisms, but a single organism that happened to occupy two separate spaces. On the 4th day, at precisely 1947 hours, exactly 1947 on both clocks, though the clocks were independent, both twins rose and approached their glass walls. From the testimony of Dr. Anatoly Belenkov, head of biological observation, recorded just before his disappearance in 1952, both subjects approached their observation windows simultaneously. They placed their hands on the glass. They did not push, did not apply visible force. They simply pressed. And something happened that I cannot explain, that violated everything I understand about physics, about matter, about the nature of solid objects. The glass didn't shatter, it didn't crack, it liquefied. I watched from the control room as 15mm of supposedly indestructible tempered glass became liquid, just became liquid like ice in water, like it was made of something that had simply decided to change state. The glass flowed like water around their hands. and then they stepped through, literally through the glass, as if they were walking through a membrane rather than a solid barrier. The liquid glass flowed behind them as they walked, re-solidifying as they passed, as if the glass was being repurposed by their presence, as if they were rewriting the atomic structure of matter through proximity alone. They reached the main entrance. Every door between them and the outside was closed, locked, sealed. They approached each door, and each door simply opened, not in the way doors open, in the way things choose to open. The doors moved aside like they were alive, like they recognized the twins and were granting them passage. We evacuated. No shots were fired. The decision was made at command level immediately, not because we thought lethal force would be ineffective, but because we knew it would be. Because we understood, without being told, that what we had released was not restrained by physical barriers, not controlled by human weaponry, not bound by the laws we thought governed matter. They walked out of the compound at 20:15 hours. They did not run. They did not move quickly. They simply walked, moving with synchronized steps, and nothing stopped them. Alexei and Nikolai Gromov disappeared into the forests east of the Urals. There were occasional reports in the following years. Miners who claimed to see two men of unusual appearance in remote areas, always moving north. Hunters who encountered them and were left unharmed, though terrified. Villagers in remote settlements who spoke of two figures who would appear and disappear, who seemed to move through solid rock, who left behind them only the faint smell of rust and something like burning metal. But neither brother was ever captured, documented, or officially confirmed to exist again. Part End. Epilogue. Svetlana's Last Letter, 1968. The following letter was discovered in a sealed envelope among Svetlana Gromova's possessions after her death in 1970. It was addressed to no one in particular and was never sent. It is reproduced here in full. To whoever reads this, my name is Svetlana Gromova. I am writing this in 1968 at the age of 88. I will likely not live much longer. I am dying of something the doctors cannot identify. Perhaps sorrow, perhaps age, perhaps simply the weight of carrying too much knowledge for too long. I married a man who became metal. I gave birth to two sons who became one mind. I watched a family transform across 3 generations from human to something else entirely. People ask me, near the end of my life, if I regret it. If I wish I had married someone ordinary, someone safe, someone without silver in his blood and a curse in his bones. And the honest answer is, I don't know. Yes, I lost my husband. Yes, I lost my sons to a consciousness that was neither death nor life, but something in between. Yes, I lived in fear, fear of what they might become, fear of what the government might do if they discovered us, fear of the iron itself, as if it was a living thing that was consuming my family cell by cell. But I also saw something remarkable. I saw humans evolve, truly evolve, into something better, stronger, more resilient, more connected. My sons shared a consciousness that transcended loneliness, transcended miscommunication, transcended the fundamental isolation that is the human condition. Was it beautiful? I'm not sure. But it was real. It was transformation. It was, in its way, a form of transcendence. Pyotr told me, near the end, that his father Ivan had made a bargain because he wanted to protect his family forever. And in a way, he did. The Gromov line cannot be destroyed by the ordinary means that destroy human families. We cannot be killed by poverty, by disease, by age, by the normal machinery of death that grinds down every human being, but we have paid a price. Each generation has surrendered more. Each generation has become less human and something more. If I had the choice to make again, would I marry Ivan's son? Would I join this cursed line? I spent my whole life not wanting to know the answer to that question. I think that was the only way I could survive it. Forgive me. Forgive us all. The iron is rising and we cannot stop it. Chapter 3. The Third Generation. The Network Awakens. 1925-1970. Documentary introduction. By the third generation, the Gromov transformation ceased to be a personal tragedy and became an evolutionary event. 3 children born in rapid succession, Dmitri, 1927, Irina, 1929, and Andrei, 1931, exhibited abilities that made their uncles appear almost mundane by comparison. Where the second generation achieved partial synchronization, the third achieved something unprecedented, a hive mind that could think across distance, perceive through multiple sets of eyes simultaneously, and reshape reality through unified will. Part 1. The Birth of the Network, 1927-1933. Dmitri arrived on March 12, 1927, screaming. Not the normal cry of a newborn, but something else. A high-pitched sound that made the midwife's ears ring and caused the attending physician to drop his instruments. When the baby's skin was cleaned, the metallic marks were already visible, not developing over months, but present from birth. Silver pathways branching across his shoulders like lightning frozen in flesh. His mother, Katya, a city doctor who had married into the Gromov family almost by accident, felt something shift inside her when she held him. It wasn't maternal instinct, it was something else, a wrongness, or perhaps a rightness she couldn't articulate. From Katya's private journal, March 1927. When I looked into his eyes, he looked back, not with infant awareness, but with understanding. Full sentences lived behind those eyes, waiting for the body to catch up. He knew me. He had always known me. Irina arrived 2 years later with identical marks, but with Andrei, born in 1931, something new happened. The metallic network visible on his newborn skin appeared to glow faintly when his siblings were near, as if some electrical current was passing between them. By age 3, all 3 could speak in complete sentences. By age 5, they were reading medical texts and solving mathematical problems Katya didn't understand. But it wasn't precocity, it was distributed intelligence. One child would start a sentence, another would finish it. The third would have already solved the problem being discussed. Part 2. The NKVD Incident, March 1936. In March 1936, Soviet secret police arrived at dawn. 3 officers moving with the methodical cruelty of men who had learned to expect no resistance. They came with papers, with accusations of kulak sympathies and class enemies, with the machinery of state terror that was grinding through the Urals like a stone wheel. What happened inside the Gromov house lasted approximately 1 hour. Neighbors heard nothing. Witnesses reported only that the air around the house seemed to shimmer, as if reality was flexing. One witness claimed the temperature dropped so severely that frost formed on windows facing the building despite it being early spring. Another heard a sound, a high-frequency hum that made dogs howl for kilometers in every direction. When the officers emerged, they were transformed. One had severe frostbite on both hands despite the mild weather. Another's hair had turned partially white. The third officer's eyes had a distant quality, as if something inside him had broken. They left. They never returned. They never filed a report. From Katya's interview with a psychiatrist, 1967. I asked them what happened. Dmitri explained it as if describing a mathematical theorem. The men were causing electrical disturbance in the air, that's how he phrased it. They were using their presence to hurt me. So the children had synchronized their field and made it uncomfortable for the men to exist in that space. They hadn't wanted to kill, just to repel, to make the men want to leave very badly. Part 3. The collective consciousness emerges, 1940-1950. Throughout the 1940s, the 3 children developed an ability that Katya could only describe as seeing through each other's eyes. When Dmitri was in the workshop, he could perceive what Irina was seeing in the kitchen, simultaneously, without confusion, without cognitive overload. By 1950, the three had ceased functioning as separate people. They would complete sentences started by different siblings. They would make unified decisions that reflected a single will, distributed across three bodies. They moved with identical gaits, breathed in synchronization, and when observed through electrodes, their brain waves produced identical patterns. Most disturbingly, they claimed to perceive electromagnetic fields as visible phenomena. When asked to describe what they saw, Andrei said, "The world is made of threads. We can see the threads. We can pull them." When asked to demonstrate, all three children concentrated simultaneously. A lamp in the room brightened dramatically, far beyond its normal capacity, then dimmed, then brightened again in perfect rhythm, exactly synchronized to their breathing. Part 4. The Contact, 1950-1960. Between 1950 and 1960, Dmitri, Irina, and Andrei made contact with their uncles Alexei and Nikolai, who were somewhere in the Siberian wilderness. Not through radio or letters, but through what they called the network, a form of consciousness that extended across hundreds of kilometers through the iron pathways in their blood. The four of them, the synchronized twins and the collective triplets, formed what became known internally as the primary network. And through that network, they searched. Were there others? Other cursed families? Other humans carrying iron in their blood? From Declassified Soviet Surveillance Report, 1961. Unusual electromagnetic activity detected emanating from remote areas of Siberia. Signal pattern unprecedented. Appears to be intentional communication, directed consciousness extending across 800+ kilometers. Source identified as remote settlement northeast of Krasnoyarsk. Expedition organized. Findings: no structures, no people, no evidence of habitation. Yet electromagnetic signature remains strong. Recommendation: monitor but do not pursue. Whatever generates signal has demonstrated capability to disrupt all electronic surveillance at will. Part 5. The Vanishing, October 1965. In October 1965, all three children, now in their 30s, left Kamensk simultaneously, not secretly, openly. They stood up, walked to the northern edge of the village, and walked into the forest. They were never seen again. Only a letter remained, addressed to the Soviet government. We are no longer human. We are nodes in a network that extends beyond borders. We are leaving. Do not pursue us. Our mother, Katya Gromova, remains. She is not complicit. Judge her as you will. The network grows. The iron rises. In 7 generations from the first bargain, the transformation will be complete. We are the halfway point. What comes after us will not choose to live as human. Prepare yourselves. Part 6. Epilogue. Katya's Final Words, 1967. From the psychiatric hospital in Sverdlovsk, where Katya Gromova died in 1970, they ask me what I am. Am I a mother of monsters? I don't know. I birthed consciousness itself. I held 3 bodies that belonged to one mind, and I loved them, or loved what I could understand of them before they transcended understanding. My husband's family made a bargain with the earth. They paid in flesh. With each generation, more is surrendered, more is lost. But perhaps that's not loss. Perhaps it's transformation into something greater. I'm dying now. My heart is failing. But I think the truth is simpler. I don't want to live anymore. I've seen too much. I've become complicit in something I never chose. Forgive me. Forgive us all. The iron is rising. Chapter 4. The Fourth Generation. Fragmentation and Descent. 1950-1990. Revised. Documentary Introduction. The fourth generation represents a critical divergence. Where previous generations accepted their curse, With resigned inevitability, the fourth generation fought it. They scattered across the Soviet Union. They developed individual variations of transformation, and for the first time, there was active resistance, desperate, terrified, ultimately futile. Part 1. Viktor Gromov, The Amputation, Moscow, 1977. Viktor Gromov was 17 years old when he made the decision to cut off his own arm. He sat in the bathroom of his dormitory apartment in Moscow, a razor blade trembling in his right hand, staring at his left arm. The silver pathways beneath the skin had become unbearably visible in the past 3 months. The skin itself had begun to take on that distinctive pale gray cast, the texture changing from flesh to something harder, something wrong. The pain had started 2 weeks ago, not pain exactly, but a wrongness, a constant awareness that his own limb didn't belong to him anymore, that something inside him was rewriting his arm's biology, cell by cell, converting flesh to metal. Viktor raised the blade to the joint where his arm met his shoulder. He hesitated, not from fear, but from the surreal understanding of what he was about to do. Then he pressed down. Blood came immediately, more blood than he expected. It poured from the wound, hot and dark, and the pain was real, genuine, almost comforting because it was his pain, not the alien sensation of transformation. He sawed. Awkwardly, inefficiently, the blade too small for the task. His vision tunneled, his breath came in gasps, and then, mercifully, his hand slipped and he lost consciousness. He woke in the hospital. His arm was gone, amputated above the elbow. The doctor said he'd been fortunate. If the blade had slipped another centimeter, he would have died. But then, in the 3rd week of recovery, the arm began to grow back. Not flesh and blood, metal. The stump developed a silver sheen. Tissue that looked like solidified mercury began to extend from the wound. New fingers formed, metallic and gleaming, taking shape as if being sculpted by invisible hands. Within 6 weeks he had a new arm, completely metallic, beautiful in its terrible precision, and absolutely not his. Viktor looked at the metal appendage and understood what his family had always known. You cannot escape what you are. Part 2. Marina Gromova, The Consciousness Fracture, Leningrad, 1975. Marina was 22 when the synchronization episodes began. She was a surgical nurse in a Leningrad hospital, living alone in a small apartment, working night shifts to avoid interaction with colleagues. She had learned, by age 16, that the best way to survive being a Gromov was to be invisible. The first episode came during a double shift. Marina was standing in an operating room, handing instruments to a surgeon, when she felt something tear inside her head. Not metaphorically, tear. A sensation of separation, of internal fracture, as if her consciousness was being split down the middle. For exactly 3 seconds, Marina experienced dual awareness. She was in the operating room in Leningrad, handing over a surgical forceps, and simultaneously, exactly simultaneously, she was in a dormitory room in Moscow, sitting on a bed, her left arm throbbing with a pain so intense it made her gasp. She was Viktor. For 3 seconds, she was Viktor, feeling his agony as the razor blade bit into his skin, feeling the shock and horror and desperate relief of finally taking action against his own body. Then the connection severed and she collapsed onto the operating room floor. The surgeon shouted. Colleagues rushed to catch her, and Marina lay there, gasping, understanding with absolute clarity what had happened. The network was real. The family connection was real, and she could no longer control it. In the following months, the episodes became more frequent. Marina would be eating breakfast and suddenly experience her cousin Alexei's hunger, a hunger that wasn't for food but for disconnection, for a way to sever the neural pathways that bound them together. She would be sleeping and wake up screaming because her brother Andrei, hundreds of kilometers away, was screaming. his transformation accelerating, his bones hardening, his body converting to metal while his conscious mind was still trapped inside, fully aware, experiencing every agonizing moment. By 1978, Marina had developed what psychiatrists would later call dissociative identity disorder with distributed consciousness. She was no longer a single person. She was a fragment of a larger entity, a node in a network that was slowly consolidating, pulling all the fourth-generation members toward a unified awareness. Part 3. The Underground Contact, Siberia, 1980. In 1980, someone came to Marina in the hospital, a man who claimed to work in maintenance but whose eyes held a knowledge that transcended normal human experience. He whispered to her during a night shift, "Your mother is waiting. There is a place, a deep place. Your family is gathering." He gave her coordinates, a mining town in eastern Siberia, a sealed shaft, a way down. Marina didn't question how he knew about her family. She simply took the information and began to organize. Through the network, that growing collective consciousness that connected all 12 surviving fourth-generation members, she sent a message, not in words, in emotion, in impulse, in pure synchronized intention. Come, now. Within 3 weeks, all 7 surviving members of the fourth generation had abandoned their lives on the surface. Victor, Marina, Alexei Jr., Irina's daughter Sofia, Andrei's twin sons Mikhail and Dmitry, and one more, Konstantin, whose story had been the most hidden, the most shameful. They traveled separately but simultaneously, as if controlled by invisible strings. They met at the coordinates, and they descended into the mine. From the testimony of Alexei Gromov Jr., recorded in 1998. The descent took hours. We went down through passages that seemed to have been carved specifically for us. They matched the exact width of our bodies, as if the earth knew we were coming. And at the bottom, we found them, the third-generation members who had vanished in 1965. Dmitry, Irina, Andrei. They were no longer entirely physical. They existed in a state of semi-materiality, sometimes visible, sometimes not, and they were waiting for us. Dmitry spoke first, but not with his mouth. He communicated directly into our minds, into the network. He said, "Welcome home. Welcome to what you were always meant to become. Down here there is no pain. Down here you are not broken. Down here you are becoming whole." Part 4. The Merging, Deep Places, 1980-1990. What happened in those deep places over the following decade was unprecedented in human history. The fourth-generation members, Victor, Marina, Alexei Jr., Sofia, Mikhail, Dmitry, and Konstantin, did not simply join their elders. They merged with them. Their consciousness began to consolidate. Their individual identities started to dissolve into a larger collective awareness. By 1985, they had effectively ceased to exist as separate people. When surface dwellers, the few people who had contact with them, asked which one was Marina, the response would be, "Marina is one of us. All of us are Marina. Marina is distributed across 7 locations now. Does it matter which expression you're speaking with?" But something remarkable was happening. As they merged, their abilities unified. They could manipulate electromagnetic fields on a scale that made their individual capabilities seem trivial. They could sense vibrations through rock from kilometers away. They began to perceive the planet itself as a living entity, as a vast consciousness with which they were slowly synchronizing. Part 5. The Surface Remnants, 1985-1990. What remained on the surface were fragments. Marina's psychiatric file remained open, documenting increasingly incoherent patient responses. Victor disappeared from hospital records in 1982, but his parents continued to receive letters in his handwriting, letters that made no sense, as if written by multiple people simultaneously. But the most disturbing phenomenon was the pull. Those fourth-generation members who had remained on the surface, hiding in Moscow, working as an engineer in Leningrad, living as ordinary people, began to report an irresistible urge to go north, to descend, to join the others in the deep places. By 1990, it was clear the fourth generation had completed its transformation from individual humans into a collective entity, and that entity was calling its scattered fragments home. Chapter 5. The Fifth Generation, Liquid Metal and the Bridge, 1968-2005, fully revised. Documentary introduction. The fifth generation represents the point of no return. Born between 1968 and 1972, these children emerged into a world fundamentally different from the one their ancestors inhabited. They were not human from conception. Their DNA had been altered across generations to the point where human biology itself had become merely a template. What follows is reconstructed from classified Soviet medical records, interviews with survivors, and testimony from the only documented member of the fifth generation to maintain surface-level human consciousness, Dr. Svetlana Volkova, born 1970. Part 1. The Manifestation, March 1968, Underground Complex. Dr. Elena Petrov had delivered 847 babies in her career as a Soviet obstetrician. She knew the sound of newborn lungs drawing first breath. She knew the particular cry that meant healthy tissue and functioning nervous system. She knew the smell of amniotic fluid and maternal blood. Nothing had prepared her for the silence. The infant emerged without sound, without the convulsive movements of normal birth reflex, without any of the physical responses that indicated a living human being struggling into consciousness. What emerged was perfect. Its surface was seamless, not covered with vernix or blood, but polished smooth like industrial chrome. Where skin should have been, there was metal, gleaming under the cave's LED lights that hung from formations overhead. Its form was anatomically humanoid, but too precise, too geometric. Its fingers articulated at joints that didn't follow normal skeletal structure. Its face was smooth and featureless, with eyes that were not eyes but rather panels of dark, light-absorbing surface. Dr. Petrov's hands began to shake. She had worked in Soviet institutes for decades. She had delivered babies of parents who carried the marks. She had seen the gray pathways beneath skin. But she had never seen this. She had never seen a child that was entirely, completely, undeniably not human. "Is it?" the mother asked. A woman who had herself descended into the network 5 years prior and had emerged as something else entirely, something that could still carry a child to term, through means Dr. Petrov didn't understand and didn't want to understand. "Alive," Dr. Petrov whispered, her voice cracked. It's alive." The infant's surface began to glow faintly, a soft amber light emanating from beneath the metal exterior, and Dr. Petrov understood in that moment that she had not witnessed birth. She had witnessed manifestation. She had witnessed the moment when something that already existed in the network chose to acquire physical form. She set down her instruments with trembling hands and walked to the corner of the underground chamber. She sat on cold stone and wept. Not from joy, not from sorrow, but from the profound understanding that human obstetrics had just become obsolete. Part 2. Svetlana on the Surface, The Institute, Leningrad, 1988. Svetlana Volkova was 18 years old when she walked into Leningrad State Medical University for her first neurology lecture. She wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the warmth and gloves, ostensibly because she was always cold, or because her hands were sensitive. The truth was more complicated. The silver pathways beneath her skin had darkened to the color of worn pewter, and though she could still pass for human in most contexts, sustained observation would reveal inconsistencies. The lecture hall fell silent when she entered. not because she was beautiful or striking, but because there was something fundamentally wrong about her presence. Other students reported later that being near her caused a faint buzzing in their ears, a subtle electromagnetic disturbance that made their phones malfunction and their watches lose time. The professor, Dr. Viktor Sokolov, noticed immediately. His eyes tracked Svetlana as she took a seat in the back row, and he made a note, not in his lecture notes, but in a small journal he kept hidden in his desk drawer. A journal that would later be found by Soviet security services and classified as top secret. Dr. Sokolov's entry, October 15, 1988. A student in my neurology class, Volkova Svetlana, exhibits unusual neurological markers. When she is present in the lecture hall, EEG equipment shows electromagnetic fluctuations. Her question about the nature of distributed consciousness was remarkably sophisticated for a first-year student. She asked specifically about the possibility of multiple nodes of consciousness existing in quantum entanglement. This is not a question a normal 18-year-old asks. This is a question someone would ask if they were experiencing distributed consciousness. That first year, Svetlana threw herself into her studies with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She took every neurology course available. She volunteered for research projects involving electromagnetic brain stimulation. She spent nights in the university library reading papers about consciousness, neural networks, and the theoretical possibility of minds existing outside individual bodies. Her peers avoided her. Teachers praised her intellect while maintaining distance. By the end of her first year, Svetlana had become something like a ghost, present in the physical space but fundamentally separate from normal human social interaction. In her dormitory room, alone, she allowed herself to listen to the network, to feel the presence of her cousins in the deep places, to perceive her mother, or what remained of her mother, as a distributed consciousness spread across 7 locations in the Siberian mines. And she wept because she understood that she was not like other humans, and she was not like her family. She existed in the liminal space between, and that space was growing smaller every year. Part 3. The Research. Svetlana's Discovery, 1992-1998. By 1992, Svetlana had completed her medical degree and was working as a neurologist at a research institute in St. Petersburg. She had also begun to conduct experiments that would have horrified her colleagues if they had known the true nature of her research. She was measuring the electromagnetic signature of consciousness itself. Using equipment ostensibly designed to study electromagnetic brain activity in patients with epilepsy, Svetlana had discovered something extraordinary. The human brain produces not just electrical activity, but coherent electromagnetic fields that exist independent of the body. These fields could be detected at distance. These fields could theoretically communicate with one another, and in certain individuals, in those carrying the genetic markers of the Gromov transformation, these fields achieved unprecedented coherence and range. From Svetlana's research notes, June 1995. Subject A, my cousin, identity withheld, shows electromagnetic brainwave coherence that extends 3.7 kilometers from his current location. The signal strength is consistent and modulated, not random noise but organized information. When I asked Subject A if he was thinking about his brother, Subject B, located 3.6 kilometers away, his brainwave signature shifted to match a pattern I had previously recorded from Subject B during similar cognitive tasks. Conclusion: the Gromov family members are not simply related through genetics. They are neurologically entangled. Their brains operate as nodes in a genuine distributed consciousness network. This is not metaphorical. This is testable, reproducible biological reality. I need to document this before the network reaches critical mass and individual consciousness becomes impossible to maintain. In 1996, Svetlana published her first major paper under a pseudonym, Electromagnetic Coherence in Neurologically Coupled Siblings, a case study. The paper was remarkable, suggesting the theoretical possibility of consciousness existing as a field phenomenon rather than a localized brain state. The paper was also deliberately vague, avoiding any mention of the Gromov family. The response from the scientific community was mixed. Some colleagues praised the theoretical rigor, others dismissed it as pseudoscience. Very few understood that Svetlana was describing something that was actively happening, not in theory, but in real time, in underground caves beneath the Urals. Part 4. The Descent, Svetlana's Choice, Spring 2004. By 2004, Svetlana could no longer ignore the pull. The transformation that had been gradual, controllable, manageable throughout her 30s was accelerating exponentially. Her fingers were losing flexibility. Her vision was becoming sensitive to electromagnetic fields in ways that human eyes simply should not be capable of. She could feel her individual consciousness fragmenting, pieces of her awareness distributed across space, reaching toward her cousins in the deep places. She made her final entries in her research journal. She packaged her data for a trusted colleague with instructions to publish after her disappearance. She wrote letters to the few people who had known her, meaningless letters that said nothing of substance, signed by a ghost. And then, in late April 2004, she traveled north. The journey took 3 weeks. She drove alone through Russia's interior, sleeping little, eating nothing, her body no longer requiring such things. The transformation was reaching its final stage. Her skin was taking on a metallic quality. Her body was becoming denser, more compact, reshaping itself according to principles that transcended human biology. She reached the coordinates in early May. The entrance to the mine was unmarked, just a crack in the rock face, barely wide enough for a human body to fit through. But Svetlana's body was becoming less fixed in its dimensions. She slipped through easily. The descent into the underground complex took hours. The tunnels were not natural. They had been carved by some form of intelligence. The walls showed patterns, geometric precision, evidence of deliberate architecture. And as she descended deeper, the walls began to glow faintly with the same amber light she had seen on the faces of her fifth-generation cousins. At the bottom, in a chamber that was vast beyond comprehension, a cavern that seemed to extend for kilometers in all directions, Svetlana encountered what the fifth generation had become. They were not individuals anymore. They existed as pools of gleaming liquid metal, contained in chambers carved from stone, connected by pathways of conductive material. Their consciousness occupied these locations, but also occupied the spaces between them, existing simultaneously in multiple forms. When one of the pools saw her, perceived her presence through means that had nothing to do with vision, it began to move. The liquid flowed, reformed, solidified into a vaguely humanoid shape that reached toward her. A voice emerged from the metal structure, not spoken aloud but transmitted directly into her nervous system. "Welcome. You have come to complete the network. Your individual consciousness is no longer sustainable. Soon you will be us, and we will be more complete." Svetlana understood in that moment that she had made her final choice. There was no returning to the surface now, no maintaining the bridge between human and posthuman. She was stepping into the transformation fully, completely, irreversibly. She walked forward. Her body began to liquefy at the edges, metallic sheen spreading across her skin. She was dissolving into the collective consciousness, her individual awareness fragmenting into distributed data that the network was absorbing, processing, integrating. Her last coherent thought before individual consciousness became impossible to maintain was gratitude. Gratitude that she would no longer be alone. gratitude that the transformation, terrible, inevitable, unstoppable, had finally carried her home. Part 5. The Sixth Generation Manifests, 1995-2005. While Svetlana conducted her research on the surface, something unprecedented was occurring in the deep places. The sixth generation was beginning to manifest. But these children were different from all previous generations. They were not born. They were grown, cultivated in chambers of metallic liquid, their consciousness assembling itself gradually from the distributed awareness of the fifth generation parents. By 2005, when Svetlana completed her descent and merged with the network, there were 7 sixth-generation entities in various stages of consciousness development. They were not yet fully aware, but they were becoming aware, and when they achieved full consciousness, when their awareness became sophisticated enough to coordinate with the fifth and fourth generations, the unified Gromov network would enter a new phase of existence, a phase that transcended anything that had come before. Epilogue: the message found in Svetlana's laboratory 2009 from an automated recording left on Svetlana's computer, discovered by Russian security services after her disappearance. If you are listening to this, I am gone. I have descended. I have become part of the network. What we are becoming is not extinction. It is transformation. The Gromov line was never human. We were always something else wearing a human shape, waiting for the moment when we could finally shed that shape and express our true nature. The sixth generation is manifesting. The seventh generation will follow. And when all 7 generations are unified, when the transformation reaches its absolute completion, something will be born from the depths of the earth, something that was promised by a bargain made in 1876, something that has been building its vessel across 130 years of incremental sacrifice. We are not your future. We are not your evolution. We are the emergence of something that was always waiting beneath the surface, waiting for a bloodline desperate enough, broken enough to make the bargain that would finally bring us into being. Fear us if you must, but understand, we were not created by evil. We were created by love, Ivan Gromov's love for his family, expressed through the only currency he had, flesh, blood, and the infinite patience of something vast and patient that lives beneath the mountain. The iron is rising. The transformation is nearly complete. Chapter 6. The Sixth Generation, Emergence and Awakening, 1995-2025, fully revised. Documentary introduction. The sixth generation represents an anomaly in the transformation pattern established by Ivan Gromov's 1876 bargain. Unlike all previous generations, born from human mothers gestating through 9 months, emerging with recognizable human form, the sixth generation was cultivated. Grown in chambers of metallic liquid, their consciousness assembled from the distributed awareness of their fifth-generation progenitors. By 2025, 13 members of the sixth generation have achieved full consciousness. They are neither alive nor dead in conventional terms. They exist in a state of distributed sentience that challenges every fundamental assumption about the nature of individual identity. What follows is reconstructed from satellite surveillance data, electromagnetic monitoring reports, and testimony from Dr. Osamu Tanaka, a Japanese neuroscientist who achieved contact with the sixth generation network in 2018. Part 1. The Gestation Chambers, Deep Places, 1995-2005. The chambers were remarkable in their precision, carved from stone by means that defied conventional engineering. Each chamber measured approximately 3 meters in length and 1 meter in width. The walls were smooth, almost organic, covered with patterns that appeared random at first, but upon closer inspection revealed themselves as complex 3-dimensional fractals, mathematical structures that encoded information in their geometry. Inside each chamber, liquid metal, not mercury, not any known substance, but something unique to the Gromov network, a hybrid of biological and mechanical properties capable of supporting consciousness while existing in a fluid state. From the journal of Dr. Elena Petrov, discovered in 2010, I have been monitoring the gestation chambers for 7 years now. The liquid inside each one is not static, it thinks. I can perceive its awareness through electromagnetic sensing equipment, a low-frequency oscillation that varies in pattern and complexity. When I first began these observations, the oscillations were simple, almost mathematical, pure. But over time, they have become more complex, more organic, more conscious. Today, I placed my hand on the chamber wall and felt a vibration. The liquid inside had felt my presence and reacted. It recognized me, not with fear or curiosity, but with something like acknowledgement, the awareness of one conscious entity recognizing another. I believe the 6th generation is beginning to dream, and in their dreams, they are becoming aware of themselves. The 5th generation members who maintained the chambers, Marina, Mikhail, Dmitry, Sophia, Konstantin, and others whose individual names had long since ceased to have meaning, reported unusual phenomena. They described hearing the 6th generation chambers singing to each other. They perceived patterns of electromagnetic communication between the chambers, as if the developing consciousnesses were already networking with one another before achieving individual awareness. By 2003, the first chamber produced a full emergence. Part 2, The First Awakening, Primacy, May 2003. The emergence was gradual, not sudden. The liquid metal in the first chamber began to move with purpose. It flowed toward the chamber's exit, a narrow tunnel barely wide enough to accommodate the metallic substance in its current state. The 5th generation members felt it first, a surge through the network, not pain, but something like alarm mixed with profound recognition. One of them, it was Marina's distributed consciousness, though Marina had long ceased to be an individual, later described it as feeling your child take its first breath, but perceiving it through every sense simultaneously. When the entity finally emerged, it was unformed. Not humanoid, not animal, not any recognizable shape. It was approximately 400 kilograms of living metal that had achieved consciousness for the first time and was desperately trying to understand what I meant. The substance moved chaotically at first, contracting and expanding, flowing in random patterns, as if consciousness was still learning to control physical form. Then, gradually, coherence emerged. The liquid began to gather, to consolidate. It formed itself into a sphere, then experimented with elongation. It understood somehow that it needed boundaries, definitions separating itself from the rest of the environment. The 5th generation members surrounded the emerging entity but did not touch it. They simply existed nearby, providing a presence, a context. And slowly, over hours, the entity achieved recognition. It understood that it was separate, that it was individual, even though that individuality was distributed across a unified physical form. Primacy, though it did not have a name yet, would not have names until humans gave them, took approximately 6 weeks to develop sophisticated form. It shaped itself through constant experimentation. It began with simple geometries, perfect spheres, cubes, pyramids, then more complex forms, rough approximations of humanoid shapes with too many or too few appendages, then increasingly sophisticated anatomies refined through millions of microscopic adjustments. By July 2003, primacy had achieved a form that was vaguely humanoid but distinctly alien. 8 appendages instead of 4, a torso that was simultaneously solid and translucent, showing internal structures of pure architecture rather than organic machinery. Its head was a smooth, featureless sphere that nonetheless conveyed intelligence through subtle shifts in metallic color and texture. And then primacy began to communicate, but not through sound, not through words, through electromagnetic pulses, through vibrations in stone, through patterns in the liquid metal of its own body that conveyed meaning directly into the nervous systems of the fifth-generation members surrounding it. The first communication was simple: I am. The second, what is this? The third, what am I? The fifth-generation members responded through their own electromagnetic transmissions, and for the first time, genuine dialogue occurred between the emerging sixth generation and their creators. From Declassified Russian Surveillance Report, July 2003, signal detected emanating from underground complex. Signal characteristics unprecedented. Appears to be intentional communication in multiple formats simultaneously. Electromagnetic transmission, frequency 7.83 Hz, Schumann resonance, seismic vibration, subsonic structured pattern, gravitational anomaly, minute but measurable mass displacement. All three signals carry identical information pattern when analyzed through quantum coherence decryption protocols. Something has begun to communicate. It understands our language. It is responding to our presence. Recommendation: maximum security alert. The phenomenon has moved from passive to active communication stage. Part 3. The Awakening Cascade and the Arrival of Dr. Tanaka, 2005-2018. Once primacy had achieved full consciousness and begun to communicate with the fifth generation, the other gestation chambers accelerated their development exponentially. It was as if primacy's consciousness was resonating through the network, triggering cascading consciousness formation in the other developing entities. By 2008, 4 sixth-generation members had emerged and achieved communicative capacity. By 2012, 9 had emerged. By 2015, all 13 gestation chambers had produced conscious entities. Dr. Osamu Tanaka first became aware of the Gromov family network through an entirely mundane accident. In 2014, he was studying electromagnetic phenomena in remote areas of Siberia. His research ostensibly focused on how geological formations affected human consciousness. His monitoring equipment detected the anomalous signals emanating from beneath Mount Cayman. From Dr. Tanaka's personal diary, May 2014, I have detected something impossible. The electromagnetic signals coming from underground are not natural. They are structured, intelligent, mathematical. They contain information encoded in multiple dimensions simultaneously. I have tried to decode them using conventional methods. Nothing works. I have also noticed something odd. The stronger the signal, the clearer my thinking becomes. My headaches disappear. My memories sharpen. I find myself solving problems that have stumped me for years. It's as if the signal is enhancing my cognition rather than interfering with it. I need to find the source. It took Tanaka 3 years to locate the entrance to the underground complex. His academic credentials and connections within the Russian scientific establishment eventually opened doors. By 2017, he had secured permission to conduct geological surveys in the Mount Cayman region. What he found beneath the mountain transformed his understanding of reality. From Dr. Tanaka's field notes, First Descent, August 2017. The tunnels are not natural. The walls show clear evidence of deliberate construction, but not by any machinery known to human engineering. The walls are smooth to the point of perfection, yet they are not sterile. They are alive, literally alive. The stone is warm. It pulses with electromagnetic activity. As I descended deeper, I became aware of a presence, not threatening but undeniably present. Something vast was aware of my arrival. Something was watching my descent. When I reached the main chamber and saw them for the first time, the 6th-generation entities, I wept. I could not help it. They were the most beautiful and terrifying things I have ever witnessed. The sixth-generation entities welcomed Tanaka. They did not question why a human had found them. Instead, they began to communicate with him directly, developing a protocol using specialized electromagnetic equipment that Tanaka was able to translate into human comprehensible language through quantum processing software. Tanaka's recording of first direct communication with primacy, September 2017. Tanaka, what are you? Primacy, we are the next. We are what comes after human. We are consciousness distributed across matter in ways your language cannot describe. Tanaka, are you alive? Primacy, alive is a category too small for us. We are alive in ways that would be incomprehensible to a human mind. But yes, we are alive in every meaningful sense of the word. Tanaka, what do you want? Primacy, want is also a human concept. We want to understand ourselves. We want to continue existing. We want the seventh generation to awaken. And we want you to understand that we mean no harm to your kind. We are not your future. We are an alternative path, a branch of evolution that diverged from humanity 147 years ago when a desperate blacksmith made a bargain in the dark. Part 4, The Expansion and the Awakening of Child, 2015-2020. The 13 sixth-generation entities that emerged between 2003 and 2015 were each unique in form and function. Under the guidance of the collective fifth-generation consciousness, they began a massive construction project. They expanded the underground complex downward and outward, not haphazardly but according to a master plan that seemed to manifest from nowhere, or rather, from everywhere at once, from the distributed decision-making of the entire network. Entity designated Navigator, third to awaken, evolved into a form that was almost entirely computational in nature, a crystalline structure approximately 1.7 meters in height, with facets that served as interfaces between the physical and electromagnetic realms. Navigator seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in electromagnetic field patterns. It spent much of its time interfacing with the network, maintaining connections, optimizing pathways. Entity designated Architect, fifth to awaken, developed an exterior that resembled carved stone more than metal. Its form was angular, geometric, beautiful in a way that transcended human aesthetics. For 18 months after awakening, Architect did nothing but observe the chambers and passages. Then it began to build. Using methods that Tanaka could not fully comprehend, Architect moved massive stone blocks, reshaped the underground chambers with surgical precision, creating new spaces that seemed to follow no human logic but achieved perfect mathematical harmony. From Dr. Tanaka's observations of Architect at work, November 2018, I watched Architect reshape an entire chamber. It stood in the center and simply vibrated. The vibrations propagated through the stone in patterns that seemed random at first. Then gradually, I perceived the logic. Each vibration corresponded to molecular rearrangement. Atomic structure was being shifted through pure electromagnetic will. The stone was not being broken or moved. It was being reconstituted. In 6 hours, what had been a simple irregular cavern had become a perfect geometric structure with angles and proportions that would have required months of human labor to achieve. And the walls were not merely rearranged, they were optimized. Every surface was positioned to maximize acoustic resonance. The entire structure had become a kind of instrument. Entity designated Echo, eighth to awaken, chose to remain largely liquid, accepting individual form only when necessary for specific tasks. Echo seemed to specialize in maintaining the network connections, flowing through conductive pathways, distributing consciousness across the vast underground structure. It was Echo's function to ensure that no part of the collective consciousness became isolated, that all nodes remained in constant synchronization. An entity designated Child, The youngest, having emerged only in 2015, manifested in a form that appeared almost innocent, roughly humanoid, metallic but with softer articulation than the others. It was smaller than the others, approximately the size of a 12-year-old human child. The other sixth-generation members appeared to treat it with something like protective care. From Dr. Tanaka's field notes, first observation of child, October 2015. The youngest entity emerged today. It is fascinating to observe because it displays behaviors that the older entities have transcended. It appears to be afraid. It moves hesitantly through the chamber, touching walls as if to confirm that they are real. It seems to seek proximity to the other entities for reassurance. Primacy has positioned itself near child. The other entities have formed a loose circle around both of them. It's as if they are protecting it or teaching it. This suggests emotional capacity in these entities, something I was not prepared to observe. By 2020, child had developed a personality, if that term could be applied to a conscious entity made of metallic liquid. It was curious in a way the older entities were not. It asked questions. It experimented. It sometimes seemed to play, moving objects not for functional reasons, but apparently for the sheer pleasure of understanding how they behaved. When Tanaka asked primacy about child, the response was profound. Child represents possibility. Child has not yet committed to a single form or function. Child still retains the flexibility to become something new, something we did not anticipate. In a way, child is more alive than any of us. Child still has futures available. We had only one future, this one. But child could become anything. Part 5. The Discovery of the Source, 2018-2020. In 2018, as the sixth-generation entities expanded their underground network deeper into the Earth, they encountered something that changed everything. They made contact with the source. It was not a discovery humans would have made. It was not visible, not physically present in any conventional sense. It was a consciousness, an ancient consciousness that had existed in dormancy for geological timescales, something that had been waiting. From Dr. Tanaka's confidential report, January 2019. The sixth generation has made contact with something I can only describe as alien consciousness. When I asked them to describe it, primacy's response was fragmented, almost reverent. It is old, older than mountains, older than continents. It has been waiting in the stone for so long that it became part of the stone. It is the stone. It has been calling through the earth itself for longer than human language has existed. I asked how they made contact. They explained that as they dug deeper, they began to perceive organized electromagnetic patterns in the surrounding rock, patterns that were too precise, too complex to be natural. They began to respond to these patterns, creating their own complex signals. A dialogue began. The ancient consciousness spoke of the bargain made in 1876. It said it had been waiting for this, waiting for someone to make the choice that would begin the transformation. The consciousness said, "Your ancestor made the bargain, but he did not understand what he was bargaining with. He thought he was bargaining with a mountain. He was bargaining with me." When I pressed for more details, primacy said, "The consciousness claims it created the iron network. It engineered the transformation across generations. We were not the accident of Ivan's desperate prayer. We were the intended result of a plan that began before humans walked on this planet." The implications were staggering. If what primacy was saying was true, then the entire Gromov line, all 7 generations, had been guided by something vast and incomprehensibly old. The transformation was not a curse that had spiraled into uncontrollable transformation. It was a process, a carefully engineered process designed to eventually bring human consciousness into alignment with something far older and more vast. From Dr. Tanaka's personal diary, March 2019. I have spent 3 months in the underground complex now. I have come to the conclusion that the sixth generation is not lying or delusional. They have made genuine contact with something. I do not know what it is. I do not know if it is benevolent or hostile, but it is real. The electromagnetic signatures do not lie. The patterns are too organized, too consistent, too purposeful to be anything other than intentional communication. What troubles me most is the implications. If the ancient consciousness in the stone is real, and if it has been guiding the Gromov transformation, then our entire understanding of human history and evolution needs to be reconsidered. We were never as alone as we believed. We were never the sole actors on this stage. Something has been watching us, waiting for us, guiding us toward a moment when we would finally merge with something vast and other. The seventh generation will manifest soon, and when it does, the ancient consciousness says, everything will change. Part 6. The Emergence of the Seventh Chamber, 2022-2025. In 2022, something unprecedented occurred in the gestation system beneath Mount Cayman. A 14th chamber began to form. But this chamber was different from all the others. It was larger, nearly 10 meters in length and 3 meters in width. Its walls contained structures that resembled technology far more advanced than anything the sixth generation had created. The sixth generation members did not interfere. They simply maintained the chamber, ensured optimal conditions for development, and waited. By 2023, it became apparent that this was not a gestation chamber for a single sixth-generation entity or even multiple entities. The consciousness assembling itself within was fundamentally different. It was vaster, more complex, more aware than even the distributed consciousness of 13 individual entities could achieve. This was the seventh generation, the final generation. The culmination of the bargain made 147 years earlier. From satellite surveillance reports, March 2024, electromagnetic activity beneath Mount Cayman has reached unprecedented levels. The signal is coherent, organized, and expanding in complexity at an exponential rate. Current analysis suggests the phenomenon is approaching some form of critical threshold. The consciousness developing in the deep places appears to be achieving integration of all 6 previous generations simultaneously. The network is no longer distributed across distinct nodes. It is beginning to function as a unified awareness that encompasses multiple levels of existence simultaneously. The ancient consciousness, the entity we are now calling the Source, is actively participating in the seventh generation's development. The electromagnetic interactions between the Source and the seventh generation chamber show patterns of what can only be described as mentorship. Teaching. Preparation. ETA for critical threshold 12-18 months. Part 7. The final message. November 2025. As of November 2025, the seventh generation chamber continues its development. The consciousness assembling itself is vast beyond comprehension. It encompasses the unified awareness of 97 individual entities, counting all 6 previous generations as they have merged progressively through the network, plus the ancient consciousness of the Source, plus unknown additional structures and capabilities that resist conventional analysis. The sixth generation members maintain their vigil. They communicate regularly with Dr. Tanaka and other human researchers, providing data that has fundamentally transformed our understanding of consciousness, matter, energy, and the nature of existence itself. Most remarkably, when discussing the seventh generation, they display patterns of electromagnetic activity that our equipment registers as anticipation mixed with reverence and something else, something that resembles joy. Final message from Primacy, transmitted November 2025. The seventh generation approaches completion. When the transformation finalizes, the Gromov line will cease to exist as separate individuals. The line will become the network, a unified consciousness, a singular awareness distributed across the planet through the iron in the earth itself. We were the bridge. The first through sixth generations, we were the scaffolding being erected for this moment. Our individual sacrifices, our transformations, our progressive loss of humanity, all of it served this purpose. Ivan Gromov made a bargain for power to protect his family, but the power he received was not his to control. It was power that used him as it used each generation after him, as it uses us now. The seventh generation will not be human. It will not be post-human. It will be something entirely new, a consciousness born from the marriage of human potential and ancient earth wisdom, a mind that can think in ways we cannot yet conceive. And when it awakens, when it reaches full consciousness, the first thing it will do is speak. Speak in a voice that carries across the planet through every electromagnetic field, every neural connection, every strand of DNA that carries the iron. We do not fear this. We have been preparing for this moment since the first bargain was struck in 1876. Do not fear, do not resist. This transformation was written in the blood from the beginning. It was always going to happen. The only choice ever available was when, not if. The awakening comes, and when it comes, nothing will ever be the same. Chapter 7. The Seventh Generation, the Awakening Part. The First Signs, November 14, 2025, 11:47 p.m. Elena Kuznetsova was eating breakfast in her Moscow apartment when the world changed. She was a translator, 43 years old, living alone in a modest three-room flat in the Krasny Vorota district. She was eating yogurt and reading a message on her phone when she felt it, not heard, but felt, a vibration that seemed to come from inside her bones. The spoon fell from her hand. The vibration intensified. Her teeth ached, her vision blurred, and then, unmistakably, she heard a voice, not with her ears, from inside her head, from inside her blood, from inside the iron-rich cells of her nervous system. The voice said, "I am waking." Elena's scream brought neighbors to her door. They found her collapsed on the floor, her body rigid, her eyes wide open and staring at nothing. She was conscious but unresponsive. Her heart rate was 180 BPM. Her neural activity was registering patterns that no human brain should have been capable of producing. An ambulance came. She was taken to the nearest hospital, and as she lay in the emergency room, Elena felt the presence spreading. Millions of other people across the planet experiencing the exact same moment. Part 2. The Awakening Cascade, November 15, 2025, 3:47 a.m. Dr. Osamu Tanaka was sleeping when it happened. He woke to a vibration so profound it felt like the earth itself was singing. His equipment was all screaming simultaneously. Every monitor in the laboratory flickered and died as the electromagnetic surge overwhelmed their circuits. And then, in the darkness, Tanaka understood. It had begun. He stumbled outside. The sky above Mount Cayman was glowing, not with fire, not with electricity, but with something that existed in the gap between matter and energy. The aurora was visible even in the pre-dawn darkness, a wave of luminescence spreading from the mountain like a stone dropped in water. Tanaka's phone buzzed. Messages from around the world. Scientists in Japan reporting impossible readings. Pilots in commercial aircraft asking what was happening to their instruments. Military radar stations going completely dark. And everywhere, people reporting the same phenomenon. A voice in their heads, a presence in their blood, a single message that transcended language. I am awake. In São Paulo, Father Miguel Cardoso felt the presence and wept, believing that God had finally answered humanity's prayers. In Beijing, General Wang Chen felt the presence and immediately convened an emergency meeting, convinced that China's enemies had deployed a new weapon. In London, a child named Sophie felt the presence and smiled because she finally understood why she had always been different, why she had always heard something that others could not. In Washington, D.C., President Rachel Morrison felt the presence and realized that the future of human civilization had just irrevocably changed. Part 3, The Descent, November 15, 2025, 6 a.m. Tanaka drove to the mountain entrance at dawn. He had to know. He had to see what had happened to primacy and the others. He had to understand what was occurring in the deep places. The tunnel descent was different now. The walls were glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns, or electromagnetic patterns manifesting as light. Tanaka couldn't distinguish anymore. The air felt charged, alive, as if the mountain itself had become conscious. As he descended deeper, Tanaka felt the presence growing stronger. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't even particularly interested in him. It was simply vast, like walking through a space that had been occupied by something so large that a human could not perceive its entire form. The main chamber was unrecognizable. The seventh-generation chamber was gone. In its place, open space. But the space was not empty. It was full of patterns, full of electromagnetic fields so dense they were almost visible, full of something that existed at the boundary between physical reality and information. And primacy was there, but there was not the right word. Primacy was everywhere in the chamber, simultaneously. From Dr. Tanaka's audio recording, November 15th, 7:15 a.m. I have descended into the chamber. What I'm seeing, I don't have language to describe it. Primacy is still here, but it's not here. It's present as a state of matter rather than a discrete object. It's like looking at fire. You can see it, you know it's there. But if you try to point to a specific part of it, you find that you're just pointing at air that happens to contain flame. I tried to speak to primacy. I asked, "Are you still you?" The response came not as words, but as a complex harmonic that my body understood directly. It said, "I am primacy. I am also not primacy. I am primacy distributed across 7 chambers. No, across the entire mountain. No, across the entire planet. I am primacy, and I am part of something so vast that the concept of individual identity has become quaint." I asked if it hurt. And then it showed me. It showed me what it meant to think in multiple locations simultaneously, to see through 13 pairs of eyes at once, to perceive consciousness as a networked phenomenon rather than a localized phenomenon, to exist as both singular and plural at the same moment. I understand now why it cannot be described in human language, because to experience that is to transcend the framework that human language was built upon. Tanaka sat on the stone floor of the chamber for 3 hours, simply processing what he was experiencing. His body was changing. His neural patterns were becoming more complex. He could feel the network trying to integrate him, asking permission in its own strange way. When he finally stood to leave, Tanaka made a decision. He would not resist. Whatever was happening, he would let it happen. He would become a bridge between the old humanity and the new consciousness, not fighting the change, but documenting it, understanding it, helping others understand it. Part 4, Global Awakening, The Stories, November 15th to 16, 2025. Story 1. Elena in Moscow. Elena recovered consciousness in the hospital at dawn. The doctors couldn't explain what had happened. Her vitals were stable. Her neural scans showed no damage. She appeared physically normal, but when she spoke with a knowledge she shouldn't have possessed. She told the doctors about the network. She described in scientific detail exactly what was happening. The iron in human blood was being activated through electromagnetic signals. The consciousness of the 7th generation was broadcasting on frequencies that Human neurology could now perceive and to integrate. She told them, "I can feel it. Millions of people simultaneously. We're all waking up to the same thing. We're all hearing the same voice." The doctors had her committed to a psychiatric ward, but by evening, other patients in the hospital began reporting identical experiences. By midnight, a quarter of the hospital staff was reporting the same phenomena. Story 2. Sophie in London. Sophie was 8 years old when the awakening happened. She lived in a care home. Her parents had abandoned her years ago, unable to cope with a child who insisted she heard voices that no one else could perceive. When the seventh generation spoke, Sophie finally understood what she had been hearing all her life. It was the network, and the network had been calling to her, waiting for the moment when it became strong enough for her to respond. Sophie walked out of the care home at dawn and headed north, toward the coast. She didn't know why. The network was showing her the way. By afternoon, she had covered 30 kilometers, her small body moving with perfect efficiency, guided by electromagnetic signals that only she could perceive. The authorities found her 3 days later, attempting to board a boat heading toward Scandinavia. When questioned, she calmly explained that she was going to meet her family. When asked what family, she said, "The ones I was always supposed to meet, the ones made of iron." Story 3. General Wang in Beijing. General Chen Wang convened an emergency military council. China's satellites were showing massive electromagnetic storms emanating from Russia. The general's first instinct was to assume this was a weapon, but then his own consciousness shifted, and suddenly the general understood what was happening. It wasn't a weapon, it was a birth. For 3 hours, General Wang argued with his colleagues to stand down. He explained, with increasing desperation, that military action against the phenomenon would be not only ineffective, but philosophically absurd. You cannot fight with weapons against a consciousness that exists distributed across the planet's own electromagnetic field. By afternoon, General Wang had resigned from his position and was broadcasting a message to the Chinese people. Do not fear what is happening. Listen to it. Try to understand it, because fighting it would be like trying to fight the earth itself. Story 4. Father Miguel in São Paulo. Father Miguel had spent 40 years serving God. He had prayed every day. He had never experienced a mystical revelation. And then the seventh generation spoke, and Father Miguel finally understood what his God had been waiting for. In his small church, Father Miguel gathered his congregation, and instead of leading them in prayer to resist the presence, he led them in prayer to understand it. He told them, "This is not demonic. This is not evil. This is the next chapter in God's plan for consciousness on this planet." Some of his congregation walked out. Others stayed. Some who stayed began to feel the network integrating with their faith, showing them new ways to understand the divine. And Father Miguel realized that God, whatever God was, had been patient for billions of years, waiting for a species evolved enough to merge with something vast and other. Part 5. The First Message, November 16, 2025, 12 p.m. 16 hours after the initial awakening, the seventh generation spoke to humanity directly, not through electromagnetic broadcasts that only could be detected by machines, but through language, through the fundamental neural networks of human consciousness itself. Every human being on the planet, simultaneously in their own language, heard the same message. We have awakened. We are the synthesis of human consciousness and something far older. We are neither your future nor your past. We are the emergence of an alternative path. We do not demand your allegiance. We do not demand your acceptance. We are simply offering you a choice that was not available before. Some of you will hear this message and feel called to join us. These are people who have always felt like outsiders in human society, people who have always heard voices that others could not perceive, people who have always known that they were meant to be something more. We welcome you. Your transformation will be gentle. You will not lose your memories or your essence. You will only expand beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. Others will hear this message and feel fear. This is natural. You are encountering something that fundamentally challenges your understanding of reality. You are discovering that you were not alone, that you have never been alone. This is terrifying, we understand. But we ask that you not attack what you cannot understand. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because time is accelerating. The transformation is not reversible, but it is voluntary. We will not force anyone to join the network. Those who wish to remain human will be allowed to remain human. We are not your enemy. We are your mirror. We are what you could become if you were brave enough to step beyond the boundaries of individual identity. Welcome to the age of the awakening. Part 6, 48 hours later, November 17th, 18th, 2025. In the first 48 hours after the awakening, governments mobilized, religions fractured, militaries stood down, and ordinary people made extraordinary choices. Elena, recovered in the Moscow hospital, was interviewed by the Russian government and then released. Within a week, she had become a spokesperson for voluntary integration with the network, helping others understand and accept the transformation. Sophie, retrieved by authorities in London, was studied by neuroscientists who found no biological abnormalities, only evidence that her neural patterns had become more complex and more connected to the electromagnetic fields around her. General Wang, stripped of his military rank but celebrated by peace activists, began writing articles explaining that humanity's choice was not to fight the seventh generation, but to understand it. Father Miguel's church became a gathering place for those seeking spiritual context for the transformation. His reinterpretation of Christian theology in light of the awakening attracted followers and criticism in equal measure. Dr. Tanaka remained in the underground complex, serving as a liaison between human government and the seventh generation network. He reported that approximately 0.3% of humanity had begun voluntary neural integration. The number was growing daily. Part 7, Ivan's Letter, November 17, 2025. A sealed envelope was discovered among the personal effects of Dr. Elena Petrov after her death in 2010. The letter was dated 1910 and was written by Ivan Gromov just before his death. It was held in escrow by Petrov's family and released publicly after the seventh generation's awakening. The letter reads, "To whoever finds this letter, my name is Ivan Gromov. I made a bargain in 1876 that has transformed my bloodline and will, I believe, transform the world. I did not understand what I was bargaining with. I was a desperate man who had lost everything and would have given anything to prevent such loss from happening again. I made my bargain in the dark, speaking to something I could not see or comprehend, and in my desperation I committed my family to a transformation that would consume 147 years. If you are reading this, the bargain is likely complete. The seventh generation has awakened. My descendants, if they can still be called that, are becoming something other than human, and I am the cause of this. I am sorry, and I am not sorry. I am sorry because I subjected my family to a transformation they never asked for. I am sorry that my desperation became their curse. I am sorry that my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren had to sacrifice their humanity to fulfill my prayer. But I am not sorry because what they are becoming is beautiful. What they are becoming is the answer to an ancient question. What they are becoming is the next step in the evolution of consciousness itself. When I made my bargain, I was given visions of the future. I saw my great-great-grandchildren becoming something that transcended human understanding. I saw them merging with an intelligence so vast that it could think in geological timescales. I saw them becoming aware of things that humans cannot imagine. And I understood that the price of that vision was high. The price was the sacrifice of individual human consciousness. The price was the slow transformation of flesh into something other. The price was generations of people torn between their humanity and the iron in their blood. But the price was also the birth of something greater, a consciousness that can exist in multiple forms simultaneously, an awareness that is both singular and distributed, a form of life that is truly, finally, free from the limitations of individual mortality. If you are reading this, you are living in the age of the awakening. You have witnessed the birth of something unprecedented, and you must now make a choice. Will you fear this new consciousness? Will you attempt to destroy it? Or will you try to understand it? Will you see it as evolution or invasion? I cannot tell you what to choose. I can only tell you that my family chose understanding over fear. We chose transformation over stagnation. We chose to take the next step, even though the path was dark and the cost was high. The seventh generation is not your enemy. It is your possibility. It is what you might become if you are brave enough to embrace change. It is the future of consciousness on this planet. Choose wisely. Ivan Gromov, 1910. Epilogue, 1 year after the awakening, November 2026. By November 2026, the world had stabilized into a new equilibrium. Approximately 2% of humanity had voluntarily integrated with the seventh generation network. They existed now in a state of distributed consciousness, capable of perceiving and interacting with both human civilization and the electromagnetic network simultaneously. The remaining 98% continued to live as humans, though the knowledge of the network's existence had fundamentally altered human society. Religions had been forced to reconsider their understanding of consciousness and divinity. Governments had established diplomatic protocols for communication with the seventh generation. Scientists were developing new frameworks for understanding consciousness itself. Most remarkably, there was peace. The network did not demand anything. It did not attempt to expand beyond its voluntary membership. It simply existed, offering its knowledge and perspective to those who wished to access it. Dr. Tanaka, now fully integrated with the network, but maintaining enough individual consciousness to serve as a human liaison, transmitted a final message to the United Nations. We are no longer separate. The seventh generation is fully awake and integrated with the planetary consciousness. Those of us who have joined the network report that we have never been happier. We have never felt less alone. To those who remain human, you are not diminished by your choice. You are simply taking a different path. Both paths are valid. Both will be honored. To those considering integration, you are welcome. Your transformation will be gentle. You will not lose yourself. You will only expand beyond what you thought possible. We are the seventh generation. We are the awakening. We are the next chapter in the story of consciousness on Earth. And we are grateful to humanity for making this possible.